Okay, friends, here we go. We are in Matthew 22. Jesus is in Jerusalem, beginning the last week of his life. And at the beginning of 22, we get another one of these parables where he's teaching the people around him to be able to see things that they might not be able to see otherwise. This is what stories help us to do. They help us to understand what is happening around us in ways that may not be immediately obvious. So we're just going to work through this parable. It's tough at times, challenging, and it's going to leave us with some good questions to be asking ourselves. So right here at the beginning of 22 in verse 1. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to. A couple reminders. One, a parable is a story you lay alongside of a deeper truth. So Jesus is using the story to illuminate something deeper, and the story will, one, be memorable, two, it will be entertaining, three, it will be illuminating. It will help people to see things they might not see otherwise. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to what's happening here. We haven't talked about this in the Bible study, but we talked about this in Cornerstone this past week. Really important. When he is talking about the kingdom, what's he doing? It's like he is painting a picture for the people listening. He's painting them a picture of what God's world is like, so that they who have never been there may get a better understanding of what God's world is like. God's world is in the way that things will be when Jesus reigns in glory in the future, and the way that the world is like when people live in community today, living underneath the reign, the rule of God, the way the world is designed to be. So it's like if you come back from a foreign country and you tell your friends what that foreign country is like, this is what Jesus is doing. Let me paint a picture for you of what God's kingdom looks like. It's like a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. He sent out servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. What have we learned just in those two verses? What's God's kingdom like? Well, it's like God is throwing a party, all right? God's throwing a party. And he's throwing a party for his son, and he has invited people, but the first people that are invited aren't showing up. What's God's kingdom like? He's doing something, and he's inviting people. The first people he's inviting aren't showing up. Again, he sent other servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. So he again doubles down on the invitation. I really want you coming to the party. They still don't come. He even describes the party, how great it's going to be. They still don't come. And in fact, now they begin to abuse the person who is making the invite on behalf of the king. What's God's kingdom like? God's throwing a party. He is inviting people. He is describing for us what it will be like to be at this party, but people still aren't showing up. And in fact, those folks that are telling people about the party, they're getting beat up. Well, what is this if not the prophets that came before talking about what God wants for the world? But instead of people saying, yes, that is good, we want to be a part of that. Those prophets who are speaking truth about the way the world is supposed to be, they're abused and they're spit on. Sometimes they're stoned. They're not only are they not listened to, but they're actually abused for sharing this good news about what God wants to do. The king was angry and sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Harsh, right? Harsh. Okay, well, what is God like? God is one who at times his anger can be kindled, not because he's fickle and not because he's just mad, but because he knows what is best for the world. And those who are going to get in the way of the goodness of God being unveiled and people being invited into what God is doing, there are natural consequences for that. This isn't that he got his feelings hurt. It's that there are people who are actively getting in the way of what God is doing in the world, and they're be consequences for that. Again, it's spoken in metaphor and to get our attention. But the point is that those people who God is inviting in, who are overtly turning away, you're not putting yourself in a good position when that's happening. Then he said to his servants, "The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you can find." Now get out there. Those that were invited weren't coming, but I'm still throwing the party. You see that? Just because the original people aren't showing up doesn't mean I'm not throwing the party. Go out and invite some new folk. And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. Just anybody. It's just a y'all come. Everybody show up. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. God is getting his party. And one of the things we're going to talk about later this week is how when you think about the people of God living at the time of Jesus, the Jews, you can't think about them as all being the same. Think about Christians today. Christians aren't all the same. Like if you ask what Christians believe about something, there's some things about which we would all agree, but there are many things about which different Christians believe different things. It would be like asking, what do Longhorns think about the football program? What do Longhorns or Sooners think about the possibility of them going to the SEC? Well, there is not one opinion among Longhorns and Sooners. There are a variety of opinions. There are different groups of Jews who think different things. That's going to be important when we're talking about it later this week. But knowing that, it also should be important for us to understand that what is happening here more than anything else is that Jesus is not railing against like the average Jewish person, the average Jewish man or woman. He is railing against the leadership, and in particular the priest caste, that know full and well from the scriptures about what God's kingdom is meant to be like and to look like, and are knowingly and overtly rejecting what God is doing in the world. Not just through Jesus, but that's important, but even way before Jesus is on the scene. They know what God's kingdom is supposed to look like, a place of compassion, a place where you care for the orphans and for the widows and the sojourners, the travelers, that's supposed to be a people who put loving God before everything else. They know full and well what God's kingdom is supposed to look like. And they are knowingly and overtly snubbing their nose at the invitation. This is not for just the common person. But what Jesus is saying, let's make it as clear as possible, what God's kingdom is like is like this king who's throwing a party. The first people invited say no, and then we invite more people in. What does this mean? Look at what's happening around you. God has invited this group of people, the Israelites, the Jews, to establish this kingdom and to do life in a unique way, different from the rest of the world, that God has given them. You have a corrupt leadership that knows the way that things are supposed to work and knowingly and overtly says, nope, we're not going to do it that way. And Jesus is saying, those folk are in trouble. I mean, it will be as if God is angry and sends his troops and destroys those murderers and burns their city. Okay? It will be as if that. That is what happens when you know and you were in leadership and you snub your nose up at this, leading other people astray also. This extreme language on purpose. But God doesn't leave it at that. God says, we're going to invite new folk in. And we're going to invite new folk in as in more of the Jews of God's people. This is all the disciples, all the people following Jesus at this point are Jews, just the commoners, not the elite. We're going to invite them in. Obviously, we'll invite the elite in also. They've already got the invitation, right? They should already know this. But we're also going to invite non-Jews in. We're blowing these doors wide open here. And we'll stop there. Read these last 4 verses. I think they're really good also. And talk about how even in this new family, which we'll end up calling the church, you still got to be wise, because there are some folks that are going to sneak in that don't actually want to be at the party. They just want to ruin the party. And you got to be careful for those folks. But I think it leaves us reflecting on this. Jesus is throwing a party. God's throwing a party. How am I missing what God is doing? Because we run the risk today of being those people who are missing out on the banquet, who are missing out on the party. How is it that I am missing out on what God is doing in this world? Because maybe I don't want the party to look the way that God wants the party to look. You know, sometimes we don't show up at the literal party of our friends because we don't want to go bowling or we don't want to go roller skating, right? Sometimes we don't show up at God's party because we don't want to not be the center of attention. We don't want to not be the focus. We don't want to give this of ourselves or to humble ourselves, or we don't want to forgive that person or whatever. A lot of times we refuse the invitation into what God is doing because what God is doing is not what we want to be a part of. So what is stopping you from accepting the invitation? Is it an unforgiveness that you're holding on to? Is it a habit that you don't want to get rid of? What is it that is preventing you from entering fully into the party? And of course, the question we come back to a lot: who doesn't know they're invited? And might this be an opportunity to invite them? Okay, so that is the parable of the wedding feast. Again, Jesus painting a picture of what his Father's kingdom looks like. God's throwing a party. He wants you in. How are you accepting, and how are you not accepting that invitation? God bless you, friends. Keep on reading, and I'll be with you later this week.